Hi guys, welcome to iFashi. Today's tutorial is a very simple one. I saw this dress on Pinterest and I decided to record a tutorial on how it is made. I did a little thing on the chest here. I decided to add fur to my chest because I didn't want to leave it plain like the inspiration I saw. And in this tutorial, you'll be learning how to avoid zipper bulge on your back to make your dresses or tops lay very flat at your back. So guys, without wasting much of our time, let's get into this tutorial. Today we'll be drafting on top of our fabric directly. We're not doing any pattern paper drafting because this is a very simple dress and I just decided to draft it directly on top of my fabric. Ignore the chalk marks you're seeing here. I already started drafting before I realized my phone wasn't recording, so I decided to clean it off and start over. So the first line I'm going to draw out on my folded fabric now is the starting line. This line is my chest line, so I'm going to come down from this line with 2 inches to mark my bust point. So I'll label this line the bust point, which is B. Remember, this line was taking 2 inches downwards from my first line. So whatever measurement I'm taking here, I'm starting with from my bust measurement downwards. So placing my tape rule on top of this line, I have 10 inches there. The next line I'm marking right now is my 13 inches, which is under bust point. After the under bust point, the next line I'm marking here is my 17.5, which is my front waist line, my front waist measurement from my shoulder to my front waist. So those are the lines I've marked out. The next one we're going to mark now is placing my tape on my waist to take 9 inches, which will serve as my hip line. I placed my tape on my waist point, the front waist point we just marked out, and I came down with 9 inches to give us the hip point where we'll be taking our hip measurement. So from there, you're just going to take the full length of your dress downwards. So from all these points we've marked out, we have our bust point, under bust, waist point, and the hip line. After the hip line, we'll take the full length. Before taking the full length of the dress, I'm going to come down with 24 from my waistline, which is my knee point. This dress is not flay, so we're going to have to contour the knee a bit. So from my waist to my knee, I have 24 inches. That's what I just marked there. And after taking the knee, you're going to go ahead and take the full length of your dress. Now that we have these lines out, we're going to go ahead and mark out the nipple to nipple measurement so that we can take our under bust dart. So for my nipple to nipple measurement, I'm going to take 3.75 on my bust line and the waistline, and then come down with 5 inches to extend that dart. After marking out that nipple to nipple, I'll now use 1.5 inches to tighten my under bust. I am marking this 1.5 inch on both sides of my under bust line, which is 0.75 on the left, 0.75 on the right. And after that, I'll use my ruler to connect these darts together that we're going to be taking out of this dress so that the bust can sit. Now that we're done with the dart intake, we're going to take our bust measurement divided by 4 on the bust point and then add your 1 inch seam allowance or whichever seam allowance you're comfortable sewing with. Then on the waist, I'll take my waist measurement divided by 4, which is 7.5 on the waistline. I'll replace my darts that I have on this waist. Remember to replace it back. I've not added my seam allowance. I'll be back to do that. On the hip line, I added my hip measurement divided by 4 and then added 1 inch seam allowance. Now I'm adding my seam allowance to the waistline. We're going to use our ruler to connect all these measurements together, and that will be that for the upper part of this front part of the dress. One more thing, remember this first line we drew out as our starting line. That's the chest line of this dress. So you're going to measure around your chest so that the dress will sit perfectly on your chest without sagging, because there's no chest dart here. So you're going to take your chest circumference, divide it by 4 and impute your answer on this chest line. And then remember to add your seam allowance and connect it down to meet your bust line. Now I'm going to use my pin to secure the fabric together and then shift it up so that we can work on the down part of the dress. What I have on my hip line is my hip measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch for seam allowance, right? So on the knee line, I'm going to be minusing 2 from what I have on the hip line. For example, if you have 12 inches on your hip line, you're going to have 10 inches on your knee line, because this is a straight dress, it's not flay. So I'm going to just go ahead and continue this line downwards to the full length of my dress. The same thing I took on my knee line is what I'm going to take at the hem of the dress, which is the full length of the dress. So after marking out the full length of the dress, I'll repeat the same thing I have on my knee line down to the full length of the dress, and I'll connect my lines together and cut out this front part of the dress. Now that we're done cutting out the front part of the dress, one more thing to go. We're going to be taking out our side bust dart for this front part. Remember, our front waistline is 17.5. My back waistline is 16. This is one of the tricks to avoid zip bulging at your back. I'm going to go ahead now and remove the 1.5 inch difference I have on my front and back waist measurement. So I'll come down with 1.5 from the bust line and slant it to meet the bust point. I'll mark it out so that I know that I'll be taking off that, and that will be that for the front part. We're going to go ahead now and keep this front piece aside and draft out the back piece. I've also folded my fabric like I did for the front. The first thing I'm doing on this back piece is to remove my 1.5 inch zipper allowance. And after removing the zipper allowance, I'll also go ahead and mark a straight line at the beginning of my fabric, which will serve as the chest line that I'm starting from. So remember, on the front part, we came down with 2 inches from this chest line to get our bust point. So I'm doing the same thing for this back. After getting out the bust point, the next line I'm marking out is my back half length. Remember, for front I have 17.5 and I mentioned my back is 16. So place your tape on from your shoulder downwards to get your front and back waist measurement so that you know the difference you have in yours. Now from this waistline, I came down with 9 inches to get my hip line, just like I did for front. And from the waistline, I'm also going to go down with 24 inches to get my knee line. After marking out the knee line, I'll go ahead and mark the full length of my dress. Now we're going to be removing the waist dart for our back. On the waistline, I'm going to mark out my nipple to nipple measurement I have for the front. I'll mark it out on the back and do the same thing on the bust line, and then come down with 5 inches to extend this dart downwards, right? I'll mark a straight line on this point so that I can take my 2 inches dart from the waist. These 2 inches, I'll take out 1 inch from the left and 1 inch from the right on this straight line, and then I'll use my ruler to connect these darts together. After doing that, just like we did for front, take out your waist measurement. Remember to impute the dart back. Take out the bust measurement divided by 4. Add your seam allowance to all of these measurements because we are cutting directly on fabric. This is not pattern paper that you can add your seam allowance later. So I'm also going ahead to measure my chest circumference divided by 4 and impute my answer on that first line we started with. Then do the same thing on your hip line, your hip measurement divided by 4, and then we'll go ahead and connect these points together. Remember what we did for the front? We removed 2 inches from our hip measurement to mark on our knee point. After doing that, I'll extend that line all the way down to meet the hem of my dress. And then I'll use my pin to pin down this fabric so that when I move it, all of my measurement will still be intact. Now on this chest line we have on the back, I'm going to be slanting it from the chest line. Watch closely and see how I'm doing it. Slant it from the chest line down to meet the bust line so that the back will not come out too high. So we'll be cutting that part off. The next thing is this waistline for the back. Remember, I mentioned we'll be learning how to cinch your zipper so that it doesn't puff at your back. So from the beginning of my zipper allowance, I came inward with 0.5 and I'm connecting it with a slant line. I'll be cutting that part, that 0.5 up. I took this 0.5 on the waistline. So what I'm doing here now is extending this measurement I have from my knee point down to the full length of my dress, and then I'll go ahead and cut out this back piece. You see how simple it is. This dress is very, very simple. The few points you just need to take note of are those that we took out to snatch our zipper and some other little lessons you just need to learn from this tutorial. This dress is very, very easy to make. After cutting out the back piece, we're going to go ahead and cut out the lining and go straight into the sewing of this beautiful dress. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our weekly tutorials. Now this is the back piece that we just cut out. After cutting out the fabric from the side, watch closely to see how I'll be cutting the back. Remember the slanting we did to get the back depth. I'm cutting it off, leaving out seam allowance that I'll use to turn that part. I also removed the 0.5 we took out from the waistline to snatch our zipper. And then I tear my back piece open because we're going to be opening up the zipper allowance for that back. Now our front piece is here. We have just one piece because it's cut on fold, and for the back we have two pieces. So I'm going to label them out now so that you know which one is front and back. The first thing I'm going to be doing on the sewing machine is to hold down my darts, starting with the side bust dart, this dart that we took out from the front so that the two sides will align. So after pinning it down, I'm placing the back on top of the front so that you see that they both align from the armhole point all the way down to the waist, to the hip and downwards. If you do not hold this side bust dart, the front will come out longer than the back. And if you cut both of them the same length, your zipper will end up bulging at your back. That's just the simple trick with this side bust darts. So now the next thing I'm doing before going to the sewing machine, I'm going to highlight this dart on the second part of our fabric, the other side of our fabric that the dart is not showing. Remember, we took it on only one side. So I'll place my pin there and bring out the marks to the other side of the fabric, and I'll take it to the sewing machine to hold these darts, and I'll be right back to show you guys. Now this is what we have after holding our dart. This is the front piece here. I just stitched down from the beginning of the dart downwards to the end of the dart extension for the front. I did the same thing for the back piece as well. I held the dart we have on the back waist. Remember, the dart we have on the front is for our underbust tightening, while the back dart is the waist cinching dart. So the next thing I'm going to be doing here, before joining the back and front together, I'm going to be adding a very short lining, a lining that will stop after my hip line or just at my hip line. So I'll use it to turn this neck, which is the chest. I'll use it to turn the chest part. You can go ahead and use a bias to just bias that chest part if you don't want to add a lining to yours. This fabric is not very thick and I want it to have a full coverage, so I'm going ahead to add a lining, but it's not a full lining. The lining is stopping just after my hip line. So I'm placing my front piece on top of the lining, and I'll cut it out and take it to the sewing machine to join it on that chest line, and I'll be right back to show you guys. Remember to top stitch after joining, and I'll be right back to show you guys what we have. So this is what we have after joining the lining to the main fabric on the chest. So I joined it and I went ahead to also top stitch on top of the lining. I don't know if you can see it. The red thread is very faint. So I've joined it on the chest line. So I'll go ahead now and place it on the table and then pin it down on the sides and trim out the excess I have on the sides before I go ahead and join them on the sides. I'll do the same thing for the back piece as well. I'll cut out a piece of fabric that will serve as the lining. I'll join it on the chest part of the back piece. Remember, the back piece is 2. So I'll do this joining on the both chests and top stitch, then flip it over to the wrong side. And that will be that for the lining attachment. Remember, I mentioned if you're not adding a lining to yours, just go ahead and use a bias tape to bias round the chest, both the front and the back. If you're just okay, or maybe if your fabric is thick enough, you feel like you don't need a lining, go ahead and use a bias tape to bias round the chest before you go ahead and join the back and the front together. So after adding the lining to the back piece now, I'll be right back to show you guys how it looks before we go ahead and join the back and the front together on the sides. Now this is what we have for this two back piece. I've attached the lining, I've joined the lining on the chest line. I also made a top stitch on that chest line on the lining part of it, and then I ironed it so that it will lay very flat on that part. So I've also gone ahead to pin it down on both sides, both on the zipper allowance and on the sides. The next thing I'll do now is to place this back on top of the front piece, the right sides facing each other. I'll pin down the zipper allowance first. This is the part I'm pinning now is my zipper allowance. I'll pin it, then open it out to place it right sides facing each other. The right side of the front is already out. I'll place the right side of the back on top of this front we have here now, and then I'll go ahead and pin down the sides. Before pinning down these sides, we're going to go ahead and take our body measurement. Take your tape around your chest, measure around your chest circumference, and impute your answer on the chest line. I have 34 inches around my chest, so I'm going to go ahead now and take 8.5 inches. I'll place my tape on that chest part, excluding my zipper allowance, and mark out what I have there. I'll come down to the waist point and mark my waist measurement divided by 4 on that waistline. I'll also mark it. I'll do the same thing for the hip and use my chalk to highlight all these points so that I'll know that I'm sewing along my chalk. You can see that this dress is very simple. If you already know how to cut out a basic dress, you know that we've not done any magic here. We're just doing something very basic. But be very, very careful of your measurements so that this dress would actually fit and hug you, especially on that waist part, and make sure your zipper doesn't bulge. So after extending all of my measurements downwards, remember we have seam allowance on the sides. So after extending all of these measurements downwards, I'll take it to the sewing machine now to join this dress on both sides, and I'll attach my zipper to the zipper allowance, and I'll be right back to show you guys what we have. So guys, our dress is almost ready. I've joined the two sides, and I also gave my waist point a notch because that part is curvy. You're going to go ahead and notch it so that the squeeze doesn't show on the outside because of the curves we have on that waist. If yours is not so curvy, you don't have any business notching it, right? So I've attached my zipper as well. I'll flip it to the right side now and show you how it looks on the outside. This is what we have. The zipper has been fixed, the sides has been joined. This is what it looks on the inside and on the outside. The remaining work here now is to give it a very good press. All of these seams we did on the sides, the darts we held at the back and front, I'm going to go ahead and iron it out so that everything will lay very flat. And another part I'll be ironing is this slit we have at the back. On my zipper allowance, I did not stitch my zipper allowance all the way to the down, else you cannot walk. This is a straight dress, right? So I stopped around my knee point at the back, and then we're going to be using our hemming gum to iron this slit allowance. So my iron is off at the moment. I'm just demonstrating how I'm going to be doing it. I'll do this off camera to save time. Just cut out a straight hemming gum and use it to fold in that zipper allowance we have on the back to give you a very neat slit. I'll do the same thing around the hem. I've already stitched around the hem, so I'll go ahead and use my hemming gum to give it a very neat look on that down part. And that will be that for this dress. Remember I mentioned earlier that initially I made it very plain, the same way I saw the inspiration on Pinterest, but I decided I'm going to give it a switch on the chest part. So I used my thread and needle to hand tack these feathers you're seeing on your screen. And then for the neck wrap, this dress has a little fabric that you just throw around your neck to give it that extra accessory. So what I did, I've gone ahead to fold it already. It's just like the way you cut a belt. I just cut a straight fabric. I folded it and stitched around the edges of the fold, right? So the midpoint is wider than the edges because I didn't want to just cut it straight. I'm using this fabric here as an example. After stitching, when you turn it out, you're going to have something like this. And as for the length, I have like 50 inches thereabouts. You just cut out as long as you want it to be. Now I'm going to go ahead now and iron out all of these points that I mentioned earlier. Iron out all my seams, all the joinings I did on both the two sides, the back, the slits, the hem and all of the darts I took. Endeavor to iron your work. It makes your work very neat. So after ironing now, I'll go ahead and hand tack my fur, the feathers I showed you earlier. I'll hand tack it and I'll put it on so that you see the beautiful dress that we just made from this tutorial. You see how neat the hem is. The hemline has been ironed, the slit has been ironed, and all of the stitches we made has been ironed. This is how it looked on me before I added this fur. It looked very plain. It's very okay, but it looked plain to me. And I also wanted something different from what I saw. That's why I added the fur, and it gave me this a little extra look. I love this dress so much, and I love the fact that it was very easy to make. I can't wait to see you recreate yours, and let us know in the comment section if it is better without the feathers or with the feathers. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate. Thank you for watching to this point. Remember to like this video, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in our next tutorial.